There's currently 600,000 homes that are non-performing in the United States. And so we're starting a business right now. We've got a servicing company that's like, take these houses off of our plate, just take them. And so we're dividing them out and conquering these houses. I mean, literally 600,000 houses, the servicers will pay you. They'll pay you $1,000 to just take over these houses.
Can we get this in layman's terms?
Yes.
What do you mean by non-performing?
So people that are living in the homes that went out and got a loan, right? There's a servicing company that's receiving those payments on behalf of the lender. The homeowner stops making a payment. And it's very expensive for a bank or a servicer to actually foreclose on a home. And so a lot of times they just don't. They look at the house and they go, it's not worth it for us. And so they go, we will actually pay somebody to take this mortgage and take over the mortgage. 600,000 of them a year, just sitting there. The mortgage servicing companies will pay you about $1,200 per house to just take them off their books. So if you want 1,000 houses today, they'll pay you $1 million to take the houses.
Now, what's the normal range for non-performing houses? 600,000 to me in the U.S. seems relatively low. My understanding is that there's a few million per year prior to the pandemic that just people fall behind on payments. They're more than like, I think it's more than 120 days late. It's in the millions.
You're talking millions and millions. We're talking right now just the ones that people will pay us to take.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's a subset of those.
Correct.
What's the situation on that? Is it just they're not so underwater on it, but it's like just, right on the line of like, okay, maybe we could break even on this.
Yep.
But
it's interesting because what we're planning on doing in that business is essentially going to the servicer and saying, pay us $1,200 per house to take them off your books. What are we going to do with them? Right? I'm not just going to take over 1,000 houses. That's a lot of burden because now I've got people living in these homes that now I'm the bank, right? I'm the note holder. That's a problem. I don't just own the house. I'm the lender on the house now. So I have to do something with these houses. I have to either get them performing again. So calling the homeowners and saying, hey, let's renegotiate. Let's make sure you're taken care of, which is is the ideal situation. Or B, we go, hey, let's short sell these. Or C, we go to them and offer them cash to walk away, like cash for keys to walk away, and then we put them into the portfolio. Or D, you could wholesale them to fix and flippers. Or I guess another way is you could wholesale, or you could fix and flip them yourself if you choose to do that. Which I don't love fixing and flipping. It's just a big construction game. That's all it is.
Sure.
And what's the status on these houses? Were they bought recently, like in this past year or so? And also, like, are they in fine condition?
Oh, that's a different statistic. So houses that were bought in 2021, 2022, there's about 450,000 of them that are already underwater from people buying them in 2022. And now the market has gone down an average of about 16% in the last year, the US. And so those people that bought FHA or VA, they're significantly underwater, right?
Is that like disproportionately high?
It's very high, yeah. I mean,
think about payments are so low, though. I mean, that's
payments
the flip
are low.
side.
Interest rates are really, really
still
low.
Lower than if they bought the same house today, 20% less.
But nobody's buying in the past few months and already is underwater, like with the super high interest rates and also the high prices.
Yeah, if they put 3% down, they're underwater.
Yeah, 100%.
You have to think it's going to cost them 6% just to sell. So like right off the bat, then they're losing 3%, assuming the market's the same. And then imagine the market goes down 5%.
I think that's the part that most people don't understand about real estate is if I buy a house today for $200,000 and then I turn around and sell it for $200,000, most people think, oh, you're going to break even. But people that are in real estate, we know, man, you're going to lose probably close to 10% because you've got realtor commissions plus closing costs. Sometimes you'll have inspection stuff and you'll have other weird concessions that you have to pay as the seller. The seller pays all of that expense. So what's happening right now for us, like I've got an email just popped up here like 15 minutes ago. This is actually one of my big business models is that people come to me and they go, hey, I've got a house in San Antonio. I'll let you just take over the house and the mortgage at 3.6%. So I haven't bought a house over 4% in a long, long time. Even right now, interest rates are at 7.5%, 8%, right? For homeowners. What I do and what people know me for is I just take over other people's existing mortgages subject to. Or I buy them on seller finance.
So explain this deal. They got a 30-year fixed rate loan at 3.65%. What do you do in that situation? They're behind on it.
Yep. So they bought it. Let's see, they're not behind. Okay. So they're not behind on payments. Okay. 3-bed, 2-bath house, 1,235 square feet. It was built in 2021. So basically brand new.
Sure.
Okay. First lien position, $192,000. Their payment on that house is $1,155. So I immediately look at that and they go, we're trying to sell this, but if we sold it and paid realtor commissions and all that stuff, we're going to walk away having to write a check to get rid of our house. So somebody like me comes along and goes, the asset is actually not really the house. The asset is actually the debt. A 3.65% that I don't have to apply for. That's the craziest thing about real estate. I don't even have to apply for that loan. I don't have to assume it. I don't have to apply for it. Nobody checks my bank balance. Nobody asks for my tax returns. Nobody asks for anything. No job history, nothing. I literally go to a title company. They transfer the deed into my name. I now own the property. The mortgage stays in the seller's name.
Now, don't a lot of these mortgages have a due on sale clause?
Yeah, 100%.
So what happens there?
So due on sale clause is something you should definitely be worried about. I own title companies across the United States. So we do see them from time to time. It's about 1 in 500 times that a sub-2 transaction, this is a sub-2 transaction where the seller walks away, mortgage stays in their name, I take over the existing mortgage. What am I going to do with that property? I could do a variety of things. I could turn that into a traditional rental. I could do Section 8, depending on the neighborhood. I could do midterm rentals like traveling nurses, corporate rentals. Sober living is really, really good if you want to do sober living. I love sober living, not because I operate sober living, but because I find operators who do sober living and they pay double the rent rate to operate sober living. Does that make sense?
Sober? I don't know what that is.
Sober living is like somebody goes into a drug addiction center and the government essentially gets them through, pays for that service. And then when they leave, they need a place to stay. And the government pays that $650 to $750 per bed. So most of these sober living facilities have 7 to 10 beds in a house, and the government's paying $750 per bed. They don't have to be licensed to do this.
It's a big business in Beverly Hills. When I was an agent,
Huge.
You would almost have to.
Beverly Hills?
You would almost have to ask when someone. You would have these houses with like 7 to 10 bedrooms in them, and it got to a point where I got so many calls, and I would automatically say, "Is this for sober living?" Because there were so many of them. And they would offer more than what we were charging in rent.
Yeah, double.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Most of the time, double, yeah. So you could look at a house like this that is my payment that I'm taking over, right? Because I'm taking over somebody's payment, is $1,155. A regular rent rate on this is $1,500, or about $1,600. So on a Cody Sanchez, friend of mine, she always trashes real estate investors because she's like, oh, I don't want to go buy houses because I'm only making $400 a month in cash flow. I'm like, yeah, if you're doing traditional rental, but if you do midterm or short term, which is Airbnb, or you do sober living, you're double cash flow. Plus I have a fixed debt for 30 years, right? And what happens to rents every 3 years? I get to bump my rents $150. My debt doesn't change, but my rent, I can just keep bumping my rent every 3 years.
Now, what happens though if the due on sale clause?
Oh, this is great.
Then
It does happen.
happens?
Okay. First time, there's a couple of things about this, and this is something that real estate agents don't know, but it is in the real estate exam. It's like that 20% that they fail on. It's called an executory contract. Okay. So have you ever sold a car cash?
I have.
Okay. And you have a title, right? And you sign the title, you notarize it, and you hand it to your buyer.
Yep.
When does the buyer become the owner of that car?
I believe it's as soon as they sign, right?
So they don't sign. You are the only one that signs.
Okay.
Right? So you sign over the title. The second they have possession of the title
Sure.
is when they become the owner.
Okay.
Why? Because they now control the asset.
Sure.
Does that make sense? So they can go down to the DMV or MVD, whatever they call it, and you can record that document today, or you can record it in a week. You can record it in 30 days, but you're the owner because you control that document. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So what triggers the due on sale clause? I'm going to come back to that. What triggers the due on sale clause?
Probably when you report it, right?
There you go.
Okay.
When the deed is transferred, right? So this is interesting. Jack, you're not a real estate guy, right?
I have a house, but that's about it.
Love it. Okay, cool. So you have a house, you have a mortgage, right? So you
Yes.
pay a payment
Yeah.
and you're the owner.
Yes.
Cool. So think about this. If I go to a grocery store and I use a credit card, you're a big credit card guy. You like credit cards, right? I go buy groceries with a Visa credit card. Those groceries come to me, but I use somebody else's money to buy them. Who's the owner of those groceries?
Me.
How do you know you use somebody else's money?
Because I have possession of them.
Okay, possession, but you also have something else. What else do you have? The receipt.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Sure.
the receipt proves that you have ownership, right? So in real estate, what is the receipt? It's the deed. Whoever has the deed or control of the deed is the owner of real estate. So your mortgage company is not the owner of your house, right?
No, they're not.
They're not. Just like the credit card company is not the owner of those groceries. So there's the debt and then there's the ownership documents. They're not the same. They're exclusively separate.
So you're saying you just hold the deed?
You can. Okay. So let me get to this.
Okay.
I'm building up to it.
Sure.
So if I take over a deed on a sub 2 transaction right here on the San Antonio deal, okay, if I take over the deed, and let's say in 6 months, the mortgage company notices, this is when he says due on sale clause, this is what that means. Mortgage company goes, hey, Pace took over that house subject to without paying off the debt. They transferred the ownership from owner A to Pace without paying us off. They have the ability, not the obligation, they have the ability to demand that I pay them off because I bought the house. That's
just in full with the entire house.
In full.
Yeah.
Okay?
Usually it's like 60 days or something like
Yeah,
that.
so they have to go through the foreclosure process to make it happen. Okay, so that's called the due on sale clause. So that poses a risk to two people, poses a risk to the person who sold the house to you, and then it also poses a risk to you who just bought the house, where you're like, I didn't put any money down. I took over the mortgage payments. I've now got tenants in this property. I'm cash flowing. Those tenants are paying down this mortgage that I just took over. This thing is awesome. All of a sudden I get a letter in the mail that says, we demand you pay us. That's the due on sale clause. What do you do in that situation? You could do a couple of things. One, you could sell the house, but what happens if you don't have equity? Mm-hmm. Well, you could refinance it, but that's not fun because now you got to bring money to the table. Or you can go back to the bank and you can renegotiate with them, which is usually what we'll do, and say, hey, just so you know, we did buy it subject to, but we're performing and we're making the payments. 90% of the time, they're fine with it. The first time I ever had the due on sale clause happen to me, and you're going to enjoy this as a very intelligent real estate guy. It's a house on Lost Dutchman Trail. House was in foreclosure. I catch up the arrears, right? It was $21,000. You know what that means, catch up the arrears?
Was that just the lost payments?
There you go. So they were behind on 5 months of payments. I came in and I caught up the payments. The very next day I took the deed to the house, but I kept the mortgage in place and bought it subject to. So I get a letter about a month later, and it's a bank called Johnson Bank. Really small branch, like teeny little branch, 4 branches. And the letter says, we demand that you pay us. We're calling the due on sale clause, or the acceleration clause, as sometimes they call it. And so we call the bank. I luckily get a hold of, magically, it's such a small bank, I get a hold of the actual owner of the bank. I go, hey, my name's Pace. We caught up the arrears. I bought the house sub 2. What's the problem? He goes, oh, no, we saw that you caught up the arrears. That's great. I appreciate that. A lot of our clients buy sub 2. It's not a problem, but there's a better way to do this with a bank like us. I go, okay, what's the way to do this? So he says, I suggest you do it one of 2 ways. Either A, deed the property back to the homeowner so that it untriggers the due on sale clause. Mm-hmm. And in that case, now have him deed the property back to you, but don't record the transaction. So essentially holding the title. And what we do in those situations, if the due on sale clause happens, I deed it back to the homeowner. Homeowner re-signs the deed back to me, but I hold it in a safety deposit box.
But now, isn't the city going to get involved? Because now let's just say the property is going to be reassessed at a different price. Now the city is not reassessing the property at the latest sale price.
Correct. Yeah, they get reassessed, yeah.
But would they not, though? Because you're not recording a deed.
No, in a sub 2 transaction, no, they're not reassessing, no.
Is that not a problem with the city?
We've never ran into it.
Or a state. I feel like a state like California would be cracking down, and because they want their money and they want the city and local revenues on that.
We've never ran into it, and the average time we hold a property is 7 to 10 years anyway, right? We'll refinance, or we'll pull equity out of the deal, or we'll sell the house, or whatever else. Never ran into that at all. Never once.
And what if you miss a payment? Isn't there
if we
risk to the
100%, 100%. Just like if Jack misses a payment on his mortgage, there's risk to his mortgage company, right? There's definitely risk to the homeowner for sure.
But they're putting a lot of trust in you not to make that.
Right. So it depends, right? Payment. So there's 2 different. Well, let's go back to the Johnson Bank thing real quick, and I'll put a cap on that, and then we'll go to that because this is a really good question. Sure. So that's one way you can do it, or you can buy it on an executory contract. That's what that's called, right? So when you sign your title over on a car that you own and you sign that off, in that situation, that's called an executory contract. It means he has not executed the final part of the transaction, and he holds that in limbo until let's say you sell a car to a homeowner or to the next car owner. He changes the car tires, he paints it. He could essentially take the title, never record it, and then hand it to the next buyer and upcharge it. Does that make sense? That's an executory contract. So you can do it in an executory contract where it doesn't get recorded, or B, you can do it as a lease option where the option price is the mortgage balance the day you execute the option. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, so that overcomes the due on sale clause.
But then that also implies that the seller is actually paying down the mortgage, correct?
Right. So you put in the lease option that the payments that the buyer or the lease option tenant is paying actually pay down the mortgage, and the buyer gets credit for those payments.
And what about in the event of a lawsuit? Let's just say someone sues and they try to go after the property, but the property's not in your name, the property's in the seller's name, or vice versa. They get in a lawsuit and someone sees, well, there's a deed to this house that they technically own.
Right.
What would happen?
So what you do is your agreement for sale in Arizona, or contract for deed, or land contract, or whatever it's called in other states, technically an executory contract, the agreement gets attached to the property and protects you from a lawsuit. The deed does not get transferred, if that makes sense. So somebody coming after the property trying to sue the owner will pull up and go, oh, wow, the owner actually doesn't control this asset anymore. It's this person who controls the asset.
Couldn't anyone who gets sued technically say, well, no,
Yes.
I transferred the deed over here and he just never recorded it? Isn't that a way to get out of any lawsuit if someone tries to sue you?
I see people do it all the time. I had somebody that when I was a contractor 10 years ago, I had somebody that owed me money, and I went to go sue them, and they transferred the deed to one of their other LLCs on a property I tried to sue them on. Happens all the time.
I feel like there's got to be a clause in there, because otherwise everyone would be doing this. Just like every asset
It's happening.
they own,
It's
they would just
happening
be
thousands of times in every state.
deeds,
It's happening
but then
all
not
the time.
recording them.
Yeah, it happens all the time. If you look in any state, it's called an executory contract. It's legal. It's been around for hundreds of years. It's happening all the time. I bet you in Vegas, it's happening 1,000 times a month or more. Our title companies, we probably see 10% of the time in Arizona, 10% of the transactions we see are called agreement for sale transactions, which means the deed does not get transferred. A servicing company holds the deed in limbo until the buyer ends up doing something with that property.